taking the time to give us your talk. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Thank you also for no, this is cool. It's cool to be asked, particularly by students, and it's always great to also be invited to speak at your own institution, because that hardly ever happens. So, at my own institution, I've been around for a while. Not the full 25 years as others, maybe in the audience.
I think there's only like 2 people.
that have been around that long, right? But yeah, so changing the face of bioengineering. And I hope that what you'll get out of this is just some ways that Georgia Tech is a really special place. So hopefully that will be hit home for you. But then also some things that we all can do to keep it a special place or to make it more special for even more people. But you got to start with the BioE leadership. So, I mean, again, once you walk into a space, you just assume that this is how every place works, right? But it doesn't, right? And so when they started this bioengineering program, looking back, it was actually quite experimental, because I don't really know too many other places that actually run programs across different departments where there's another person that's in charge of making sure the students get PhDs, right? So there's innovation in just starting that. And Ajit Yoganathan was the first director of the Bioengineering Interdisciplinary Graduate Program. And then when he stepped down, and I think to become the associate chair for the Ph.D. program, then Rob Butera took over, and he worked it for a few years.
Actually, you're missing Tim.
Oh, that's the one I forgot. Tim Witt. Sorry, I forgot about Tim Witt. Laura did tell me that. And then I just...
That's okay, he's not here anymore.
We're going to edit that out of the recording. So then there was Tim Witt. He sit right in there. And then Rob Butera took over. And then Rob convinced the young Andres Garcia that this would be a great program. He had all the will to do it. And he took that on and made some great improvements in the program. And then he brought on the deputy because he said, I'm rolling out so many new initiatives, I need some help with it. And of course, working with Andres really specifically has been Laura Page, who's fantastic. And again, working with her very much on recruitment, she's dealing with a lot of different matrices of information and a lot of different being polite to different groups across campus. And that's a special skill set that, again, you might take for granted if you're not involved in it, okay? But I also have to give a shout out to Chris Ruffin. Yeah. So those of us that know Chris, he was the old Laura Page, right? Or maybe Laura Page is the new Chris Ruffin. No, they're very different. And he was service to the bioengineering community. He was at Georgia Tech longer, but bioengineering from 2001 to 2013 when he passed. And amazing guy, great smile, great energy. He could deal with all the different personalities. But I used to call the office, or Laura used to call that lounge Ruffin, right? Because it was always dim, and you'd go in there and you just kind of mellow out, and he would close the door and just let you just get off whatever's on your chest, and then you go on right back to doing what you're doing, and you like keep both ways and run back out to your building. But another thing that's special about Georgia Tech is when he passed, there were so many professors and students that went to his funeral, just showing that he's not faculty, but he was definitely, and he was a student, but he was so integrative to the community that we all definitely wanted to pay that homage. So that's why we have the Chris Ruffin Award that was started. So all of you that have won that award, again, it's a special place for those of us that remember Chris. So then there's the history of really how all these things really got kicked off. Now I'm not going back to the 80s when Bob Nerum got here, because now he just walked into the back of the room, and you've heard those stories a million times if you've ever talked to Bob. So we'll jump it forward a little bit, because then I'm going to make it about me, because that's what I do. I'm a middle child, I like attention, and you gave me a microphone. But when I was here, this is really interesting. The landscape was completely different, right? And you should also understand there weren't a lot of even biomedical engineering departments around the country. But Georgia Tech was awarded a National Science Foundation Engineering Research Center in '99. GTEC, we called it. Georgia Tech Emory Center for Living Tissues. And this is really what began to put Georgia Tech on the map as a tissue engineering powerhouse. They recruited faculty, young Andres, young Bob Goldberg, Michelle LaPlaca, Joe Ledoux, all came in under these auspices. And as a part of that agreement, they also had the construction of what we call the IBB, affectionately, which was built in 1998, right? So at the time, you see this whole quad, it was the only building at the top of the hill. There were trees all down the hill. I don't even know if Atlantic was paved at the time. I don't remember, but it's a very different landscape. And then the other buildings began to grow around it due to the success of GTEC, IBB, and all the faculty they brought in. And so GTEC, being a National Science Foundation Center, they have all these other mandates that you're supposed to do, which is the beauty of NSF. So there was the GTEC Student Council. I was a part of that, which was fantastic. There were always 2 co-chairs, and this was the precursor to B-Bucks, right? There was also the Life series, or the, I don't forget the initials now, but it was Life in Industry, where they would have industry experts come back and monthly give talks. I'm sure Abby, you remember some of these things, to talk to the students, and again, students led it, students made the invitations. There was major outreach component led by grad students and postdocs. I used to take Prosthetic Pete all over the place. I don't know if you've pulled him out in a while, but he had all these engineer like an artificial knee, an artificial hip joint, and take them all over Atlanta and show people. And then the beautiful part was the monthly wine and cheese. And this is the first time I saw my professors intoxicated. And I realized they were real people. But the other really critical part that I saw that happen with G-Tech that I thought every graduate program and every research institution did was these open cluster collaborative research groups. There was an orthopedic group, the professors would meet, I forget, monthly, bi-weekly, whichever, and everybody would throw their ideas out, present their work. There wasn't like discussions of authorship and who's gonna do, it was just really just generating brainstorming ideas led by each of these 4 major thrust areas, which is an exciting thing to see as a grad student. And so the problem is you are raised up in a certain place and you think every place is like that, and then you learn. But G-Tech also, when it graduated, so when I came back to start my lab here in '09, I was like, great, I'm gonna be part of this whole, oh, it's over. G-Tech graduated in January 2009, right when I started my faculty job. And, but no, it transitioned to become a Regenerative Engineering and Medicine Center, led by these wonderful individuals here. But, so, while they're doing all these things over here in this part of Atlanta, about 10 minutes away, little beknownst to them, a young man comes and settles down into Atlanta, summer 1997, over in Atlanta University Center. That's when I moved to Atlanta. These are some of my great buddies from that summer. You'll see pictures that are scanned, and I have a cutout here because we didn't do selfies back then because we didn't have cell phones, and you definitely couldn't turn a camera around like this and know what it would look like because it was on film. Film was expensive, so you didn't really want to waste film. Anyway, so there's a lot of pictures in here that I just scanned recently, all right? So be cautious. But this is what I believe that I looked like when I first came to meet Bob Neerum. This is me, summer 2000 at Ames Research Center, NASA Ames in California. And I came to meet Bob Neerum September of my senior year at Morehouse. So you see my hair was struggling, coming along, struggling. And this was my supervisor at NASA, well, my direct supervisor, and this is another lab colleague. So I came walking into Bob Neerum's office and I was just sold on the place. So this is just before meeting Bob Neerum. My life had changed and I think his maybe a little too. So again, I came from Morehouse College, met this guy my senior year, and I love to tell the story that we were talking about bioengineering, and I was going to come here for a Ph.D., and a month later he called, or not a month, it was a week later, and he was like, how'd you like to work in my lab? And I was like, oh, that would be great, because what I thought what was happening at Georgia Tech at the time with G-Tech and tissue engineering, I call that science nonfiction, right? Because you think that who's working on these things, and they were working on it like 10 minutes from where I live, and it was fantastic. So he said, work at my lab. I was like, sure. And at the time I was working at the CDC for free, and so I was like, I can work over there for free, and it's closer. And at the end of the month, he gave me a paycheck. What? Do good things and good things happen. He's always been a great guy. So then I graduated from Morehouse. It was a great day, 2001. And I came to join the Biomedical Engineering Joint Department. And we'll talk more about this in a second. And thinking about who I was going to work for. Now, I'm a big nerd like most of you out there, but I admit it freely and openly. Yes, I've been called to it externally as well too, but I admit it. And Bob used to have this saying, never let money be the reason you don't do an experiment. Well, that's nice. I don't have that saying, laugh. But because of that, I didn't want to be treadmilling and spinning on this. I would try everything, right? And I knew that about myself. So I joined up with this nice guy here, Hunjin Jo, who was on the Emory campus. He kept a little tighter grip. And this is actually Randy Ankeny, who was my first REU student through G-Tech, through the G-Tech REU program. And I was nervous when I got Randy because the REUs were, most of them were from underrepresented backgrounds, but Randy wasn't. And Randy was from Nebraska. Actually, he went to school in Nebraska, and he was from South Dakota, right? So I was like, how did this happen? What am I going to do with this kid from Nebraska? Randy was great. He was fantastic. We had a great summer. He ended up coming to Georgia Tech for graduate school, and he got his Ph.D. as well. So then we're going to stop for a second to talk about the BME program being started in 2000, right? Kyla Turpin-Ross, who you now see walking the hallways, she was actually in the very first class of the joint BME PhD program. It was 7 women, and they called it the Ladies of BME, okay? So just Kyla Turpin at the time. Small group, there we go, that's a fun fact. But a more fun fact is that I was in the second class of the joint BME PhD program. And this is my classmate Lola Brown, who was in the second class with me. And then a most fun fact is that the second class is still the best class to ever come through the program. The bar was said, hi, good luck. Sorry. It's still that's really true. But think about that. The first class was all women. There was Lola and I, and there were several other people in the second class of 13. Diversity has always been a recognized strength of Georgia Tech. And this is in an engineering program, right? So this is even before I had to come and do anything, right? And Georgia Tech, again, has never been afraid to take big risks. The bioengineering program, that's a huge risk, right? And there's been lots of work to manage the different personalities. Then what the BME program was taking people with life science degrees and trying to get them to work with engineers. It's a huge risk, right? And things that we take for granted these days, but I didn't even know it was a big deal until after I got into the program. I'll get to it later. But this is where diversity always pays off. And this is what we also need to remember. Diversity work is not charity work. And having a diverse research group and diverse teams is not charity. That's actually the most successful teams. Georgia Tech has been top ranked for years, right? So we're the #4 engineering program, and we are a public school. Lots of people don't even realize that we are public. I always do think that if your school is named after the state that it's in, then you must be public, but of course Penn and MIT and other places. Yeah, this is when I was in high school, okay? I had a lot to learn. But beyond that, we also have been highly ranked for years as far as graduating a diverse student body. We've been #1 in graduating African American PhDs in engineering for years. #1 for graduating Hispanic American PhDs in engineering for years, right? We are second for African American bachelor's degrees because who's #1? North Carolina A&T, a historically black college, right? We're also second for Latinos for engineering because who's #1? UPR Mayaguez, right? In Puerto Rico, we can't beat them, but we're second, right? This says quite a bit, I think. And again, there are studies that have been done, McKinsey & Company and other places, Forbes and Harvard Business Review, that diverse teams are the most successful teams. This number here, racially diverse companies outperform industry norms by 35%. So these are things that we should all take forward. This is nuggets for you to use when you go out and try to put together your own teams in industry, in academy, or in policy, or wherever you're working. And things that you would have learned here at Georgia Tech. But you're also in an awesome program. Again, by being diverse, you do not sacrifice excellence. I remember when I was in school and these things kept happening, and I thought it was weird, right? That the Society for Biomaterials, which just had their conference here, where Susan Thomas won the Young Investigator Award, you look back at the list, Georgia Tech has won this award 8 times. I mean, Chris didn't. He found his way here later. He was at UT Austin when he won, but he was like, man, I wish I had been at Georgia Tech. So he came. Noreen Murphy was here, Todd McDevitt wanted to hear you. Craig Duvall. Craig Duvall was my classmate in the second class of BME. That is the best class ever. He's now at Vanderbilt. He won the Young Investigator Award. Encore Singh was a postdoc in Andres Garcia's award. That's when he became great. And so, 8 out of 18, if we had one more win, we would have 50% of the SFB Young Investigator Awards here at this institution. It's amazing, right? And I think that, again, goes to the strength of diversity. The NIH Director's New Innovator Award. These go to assistant professors, who it's this huge $1.5 million award to spend freely with your greatest wonderful idea. And we've had a number here at Georgia Tech. There's some good ones here. But look at that. Some of the ones that were trained here, they got their Ph.D. at Georgia Tech, then went on to other institutions and acquired this award. So again, this diverse mix of ideas and being able to generate innovative concepts, that's what we have fostered here that has helped us to be such this great place. So back to me, because I was enough about other people. But again, back to that second class that's still the best class ever. These 4 ladies were in that class out of the 13, and they hung really tight. So Helsi Perez Oviedo, she's now a professor at Pitt. She trained with Lena Ting. Cindy Jung is at Merck. She trained with Joe Ledoux. Sarah Coleman, she trained with me in Hanjun Joe's lab. She went to the CIA. Now she's in another national government position in Huntsville. And Lola Brown, she's now an assistant dean at Memorial Sloan Kettering. But they used to call themselves the United Colors of Benetton because there was one of each shade, right? And they were a tight-knit group, and we used to always have lots of potlucks because we like food. Different people's food brings different people together, and I encourage my lab to cook for me to this day. Now, this looks like a great picture, but of course, it's beautiful to have people look at it, but not everyone finishes, right? And this is always where there's always need for improvement. So, Hanjun Joe's lab in the summer of 2003, this is a funny picture because when I joined his lab, it was almost all Korean, except for like 2 students. And he really wanted non-Korean students. And so he began to create an environment in his lab so that the others were welcome, right? He was like, please don't speak Korean in lab so the other students will feel included. And it's these little things that we can all do that just make the team more cohesive. And so then this is at the end of the summer RU where Ryan was my RU student that summer. So I have this thing where it's like Randy, Ryan, and if you know Philip Keegan, my first grad student, there's this thing for blonde, block-headed guys that seem to be attracted to my research group. But this is us in 2003. Again, that's me and Randy. And Ryan, he went to Tulane, and then he went on to get an MD, and he's now a resident in oncology. And I see him every summer when I go to New Orleans, and they just had a baby 2 years ago. But Ryan is great, but the thing about Ryan, it's a crazy story. He ended up having cancer his senior year of college after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. And he had to move to Baton Rouge, and this kid is still, he always had this smile. But it's just this great story when I called him, like, Ryan, are you graduating? He was like, it's like the craziest thing you'll ever hear. And he goes to talk about the cancer, which, but still, he smiled through it. And Ryan was also amazing because he loved Kanye. This is back when Kanye was just getting started. We won't speak of Kanye anymore, ever. It's a historical perspective. Historical. And I just want to show a few more old things when we get to the other thing, but again, we celebrated everything back in the day. It was a new program, the faculty were young and energetic and exciting, the students were exciting. So this is me celebrating after my thesis proposal. I was the first in my class to go, and so we all were like, wow, what was that like? And you recognize this young lady here. This is a young Hannah Song who works at the lab group these days. But let's look at the numbers, because again, when I was here, it was an interesting time and space, because the bioengineering program, plus mechanical engineering, plus chemical engineering, because again, when they put IBB together, all the different departments had students all in this one place, right? And there actually was what seemed like a large diversity of students around, and I had a great group of, there were a lot of black grad students that were around, but then they were leaving. Not graduating, but they were leaving, right? And that became a concern to us. But these are the numbers for the bioengineering enrollment over time. And there's some interesting things that now that I do recruiting, it's interesting to see that the drop in international students for our programs is quite interesting. And I remember this year, I think Susan Margulies asked me, she said other departments on campus were asking, how do we recruit so many domestic students? Because other departments are high in their international numbers. I don't have an answer for that, but to see the drop over time, I think is quite interesting. And then you see the numbers that we have down here for the underrepresented groups. Now, I'm not sure, Andres, when did you take over as the director of the program?
In 2008.
Because then these Latino numbers just started. Representation matters, okay. But then if you look at it, so it looks, and then what always happens with diversity numbers, people say, look, we're doing great, we're better than everybody else, we're better than every other institution. And Georgia Tech has been better than every other institution for years, right? But if you come back and look at the absolute numbers, so this is how many were in the program at any given time, so let's approximate between 80 and 120, right? But then if you have 8 black students out of that 160, does that feel like a lot, right? Or then as you drop down to, I guess this is 1, does that feel like a lot, right? And so I just want to put that out there in the space of what we all do it for our reports. We add up the numbers and say the total percent URM in women is this, so it looks good, but the student that is in that experience may have a different take on it, right? And that's something that I think that we all should start to appreciate. Look at boy, those numbers, they're doing well. But, this is how we used to dress in 2000.
You're still dressing.
I do still have these clothes. But what I also want to say is, again, the beauty of where we were and what we were doing at Georgia Tech is we were doing diverse types of science, but we also hung out together as a diverse group, multiple people. So I had an 80s party when I bought my condo. Don't ask questions about it. And these are my lab mates, and it's really funny. Anyway, I just like to show fun pictures. But I really want to shout out Hannah Song. She started a bioengineering program a year after I started, and she came here straight from Korea. And the education that I've gotten from Hannah it's been magnificent because I didn't have really any immigrant friends prior to her, right? Who were like just straight from their other country. And she came over from Korea. She went to KAIST, which is like Korea's MIT, joined the Joe Lab where there were plenty of Koreans around that she could have just plugged in with them, and she did, but she also was like freshly able to be my friend. And what was awesome is she didn't come with any preconceived notions, biases, or any of those things of what being black in America was like. And it was so fascinating because there would be discussions in the lab, and I'd be like, what are you all saying? And she would be working, because she was a hard worker, and then she would come around and they would tell her, and she would be like, that sounds crazy. Why do you all think that? And so I began to realize there's something about the time in which one spends in this country when one's views begin to be formed. But at the same time, I had to understand the difficulties that she was dealing with. Her English wasn't so great when she first got here, at least talking-wise. And so Dr. Joe was like, we were taking, I think it was Andres' cell engineering class. He's been teaching that for some years, I'm here. And Dr. Joe was like, Manu, you need to put her in your group. And I was like, she don't really talk English well, I don't want to do it, right? He was like, you need to do it. And I was like, okay. And there were me and two other students. And when it came time to put that first rough draft together, what she wrote was so fantastic, and far above the squalor of the other two, that it was I was like, okay, we're friends, and this is it. And whatever hurdles that I need to help you get over, I'm here to help you get over them, because this is fantastic. So I say that to say, not that I'm perfect, we all have our biases, we all have our prejudices in the way we treat others, and those are things that if you acknowledge them, then you can get over them. And so this is us in San Diego for my very first conference, and that experience is a whole interesting thing. But again, now she works with Dr. Bojwe and I, and this is as she joined me when I got the 40 under 40, as Aaron mentioned. We were in Italy last summer for a conference, and the whole lab went to her wedding last summer when she got married. And again, we were table number 5, is that what? Table number 5, where the rest of the Koreans in the thing were like, table number 5 is what? We were having a good time, we were on the dance floor, and we brought a whole other energy to this Korean wedding, right? And it was just a fantastic thing, and I'm really glad that I've learned so much, and she's been a part of my life in Korea. And so then I graduated. This is what the Joe Lab looked like when I graduated. Still hanging on, always friends in the group, but great friends with group. And then I went away. So I started with, you only know how you were raised, and you think every place is like that. So I left Georgia Tech, and I went up north to a school in Massachusetts, and it was not at all like this, at all. And lesson learned, right? And that was really a surprise to me, that that it could be so different, right? A successful school as well could have such a different model. And so then I raced back to Atlanta and began to freely talk about my ideas all over again and open up the doors of collaboration with all the wonderful people here. And we started doing a whole range of different activities. Some of them because they were my original ideas, others because they were grant opportunities for new investigators, others because collaborators brought me in, and all of these things that just keep burgeoning. And this is why this is, again, such a beautiful, amazing place that allows that to happen. And when I started in January 1st, 2009, and we had just got a new president about 3 weeks later. January 20th, 2009 is when the inauguration of Barack Obama. And it's so interesting, I track very closely with that, because me being this black professor was a whole new thing. Now when I got here, luckily, there was another black professor in the department, Gilda Berabino. When I was in grad school, there weren't any, and that was a huge thing for us graduate students. So I tracked with this really well, because it really was impactful when he left office, how things would change and how even for me it would change. But COE, College of Engineering, New Faculty Orientation, 2009, you see yourself in there. Again, the best class of faculty to ever come through Georgia Tech College of Engineering. Why do I say that? Well, it's an iconic class. Why? There's Manu Platt, Baratin DeCola, Julie Champion, Brandon Dixon, and the director extraordinaire, Mark Stasinski. We were all in that class coming in together. It's quite fantastic, right? Oh, young Julie. Iconic. But what also makes this picture iconic too, Jane Ammons is in this picture. She was an associate dean at the time. She would go on to, well, I'll talk about it, but she would go on to become the first woman chair of an engineering department at Georgia Tech, and she chaired ISYE a few years after this. Of course, Don Giddens, who was the dean of engineering, that's why he's in the picture, and he, of course, then was the one who helped start the BME joint program and was our first chair of that program as well. Again, picture's iconic. I told you. Okay. So then I had my first lab group. There's Phil, my other little blonde, black-headed young man. Phil and Becca, and this is us. This was the crew that got started. We grew, that's us at BMES. We had lots of undergrads that were fantastic. We graduated some students, and we're proceeding through the process. But Georgia Tech as a whole had this great diversity reputation, but the bioengineering BME programs weren't really contributing to that. And that was a puzzle, right? Because black people love Atlanta, right? And Andres Garcia is amazing. Like, why aren't people coming? So there was still this struggle, as you can see, I started in 2009, right? And so I've always been a fan of doing outreach and diversity work. Again, I went to Morehouse. I was always working with middle school, high school students there. So it's like, this is a part of what professors do, this is education. We're gonna go and reach out, right? But I kept getting this advice to not do that thing because you need to focus on the research aspects. That's what the school needs, and don't get sidetracked with the other, right? And it is advice because it's easy to get caught up in the outreach stuff and focus less on the other opportunities. But also, I have lived a life of being the only in several different spaces, and I love this RuPaul quote, where what other people think of me is none of my business, right? Now, that's a beautiful way to live, almost, but in this job, there's peer review. So it's the exact antithesis to not caring about what other people think. Because now you have to care about people who you don't even know think about you, which adds an extra level of complication. And so again, this whole thing about tenure and waiting for tenure and how do I navigate and get to tenure, right? And I quickly had to come to grips. And there are going to be points in your career, young people, you would have to decide, do I listen to what I am told because that is what is best? Or do I think about how it would work best for me, right? And so I had to realize I'm not going to get tenure like a 50-year-old Korean immigrant, Dr. Joe, would have, who had great advice, right? I'm not going to get tenure like 60, 65, 70-year-old Bob Nerum, 75-year-old white man would have gotten tenure, right? Because I'm not like that. I'm different, right? And the time is different. But I'd say listen to advice from anyone and consider the source, right? So consider their perspective and what might work for you. Because if you haven't been down that road, you don't know what's coming. So it's great to be warned about it and then modify as you go. Then also when I started, NIH came out with this fantastic report about all things normalized. Publications, schools that you were trained, years in the business. Black PIs will still be 50% less likely to be funded. I was like, oh, that's awesome. It's really, really exciting. So 2% of faculty are African American, and those of us in this game were hustling, and everything being the same still. So I was like, well, this tenure thing would be great, but let me just run and do the things I want to do while I have this great job right now, okay? And so I love this Maya Angelou quote, if you're always trying to be normal, you'll never know how amazing you can be. So we shook off the chains and we started going. And I took out slides for time because I still have way too many slides. But we started doing HIV work. We went to South Africa. We started a project in Ethiopia. We're doing our sickle cell stuff. And we're expanding our outreach. But again, what I'm most excited about is that with Bob Nerum and Lakita Cervantes, we began Project Engages here at Georgia Tech. And again, Georgia Tech's not afraid of risks. So they tell you to be risk averse, but then, that was the advice, but I'm watching all these big risks happen, so let's jump out on faith. Plus Bob Nerum, never let money be the reason you don't do something, right? And so he was gung-ho. And it was his idea, and I jumped on board. And so we started Project Engages, which we're now are in our 6th cohort of students, where it's engaging the next generation at Georgia Tech in engineering and science. And this has been fantastic, and this is part of our bioengineering community here at Georgia Tech. And so we started with bringing teachers on campus in summer 2012, just so we can get a handle of, these are high school teachers, how can we figure out how best to manage and to educate these high school students and bring them into the lab. And I will have to say, Bob could agree, the teachers I think were more problems than the students actually once we got the students on board. So that was great because we were ready and then we could, lower the bar a little bit. There's a biotech boot camp that the students go through. We've had undergrads help us run that boot camp. And then there's other familiar faces in the room, where we do speed dating for the matching. Jose was in our first cohort, or sorry, Dr. Garcia, excuse me.
Not yet, not yet.
Oh, not yet, sorry, never mind. Jose Garcia, MS, was in our first cohort. And we get them in labs early, and they are working very closely with grad students and postdocs, and we have them presenting their science early and often, because science is nothing if not communicated, right? And so there's some special things that happen with these final presentations, things that we weren't expecting, and particularly when the family and the community come along and become a part.
Trina Latham is Jane's mom, and she's proud.
Because I knew that it was in her, but now she knows that.
As we wrap up, I ask the question every reporter saves until last.
Is there anything else you want to say?
Is there anything you wanted to say I didn't ask?
You know, I just want to say thank you.
Jane's answers to my questions often surprise me. Her mom's answer leaves me speechless.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for seeing in my daughter what I've always seen in her. It's a great opportunity for her, and now people get to see what I've always known about my child, and I'm grateful for that.
And so there's Jade right there in the middle there, and we, of course, I'm still pre-tenure at this time, and so it became important to make sure that the Georgia Tech powers that be find this program going well, and also that we're getting great publicity for the program that helps Georgia Tech look good. So it became quite a strategic thing, but the other thing that was important, I knew that every hour I spend on this, I've got to spend 2 hours on my research, right? Because we don't want the case to be borderline, but if he wasn't doing that. And so this has been fantastic. Then we give out awards to the students, and you can see all these wonderful faces. And look at what's happening. These are the colleges that these students are going to. We have a number that are here at undergraduate at Georgia Tech. And this year, I think we have 4 or 5 that will be starting in the fall, with like 3 being BMEs for the first time, which is really exciting. And many of these kids are first-generation college students, right? And so the other part of the mentoring is working with their grad students to tell them how to navigate college. Like, what is that like? So that they can not hit some of the pitfalls that others may have been in. But it's beyond just the engaged students. The Georgia Tech president has been to our events, the Atlanta Public School superintendent has been there, of course the family and friends. As you may know, Georgia Tech has since started the APS Scholars Program. So the valedictorians and salutatorians of Atlanta Public School high schools now get accepted in tuition at Georgia Tech because of things that have happened as us helping to build this relationship with APS. We have this alumni panel where the alumni come back. We've had brothers in the program and other brothers in the program, so we're inspiring this across families. And Kendra Holland is my favorite student in the program ever. Okay, not really, but yes he is. But he was in my lab and he worked with Andrew Shockey, and I'm gonna cut through this for the sake of time. He did a lab TV profile. And actually, last summer, he went to UCSD to do an RU with Adam Engler. And he actually submitted an abstract and presented his poster at BMES this last year. And this summer, he'll be going to MIT to do an RU program. And his grades are killing it. He's got like a 4.1 right now at Georgia State, majoring in chemistry. That's the model, right? And we love student success like that. But I could be selfish about it. I've gotten so much out of doing this. I gotta go to the White House, right? Because of this, my engaged student, Katrina Burt. That's with Valerie Jarrett, of course, that's when Obama was still in office. And there was a White House initiative on marginalized girls and women. And we got invited, and this is us in the White House press room that is notorious these days. But we got a tour, we were in there. So I know how small that room actually is. And that's only because of doing things to increase the workforce diversity in STEM. And so for those of you that also wonder, well, is it necessary? Why do we do it? Well, yes, it's about equity and giving everyone a fair chance. Atlanta Public Schools has a lot of great programs, but they have some things that they're still working with. Now, these numbers are better now. This is from 2014. They're a little better. But this is on the superintendent's blog, where for every 100 students in APS that would attend, 59 graduate on time in 4 years, right? Out of those 59, 35 enroll in college the next year. And of those 35, only 17 remain the very next year. And these are cycles that we're trying to break. And we've had to change our own mind about not just helping them get into college, but getting them graduated from college. And so this is the first year we will actually have graduates from college that were in that first class of engaged students. But we are nothing at all. And this has quickly become a realization without the mentors. Those are the ones, that's you, that's the bioengineering students, the BME students, the MECE students, the chemistry students, the chemistry students. that take time and invest it into their engaged scholars, right? Training them how to do some things and then getting the payback when they do the work. And we are really thankful because, I got a lot of other things to do, as I was telling you about, right? So we're thankful to the mentors, but then I have a question. You haven't been a mentor yet. Why not? Come see me, okay? Our new class starts May 30th. We already have enough mentors for this year, but think about it for next year because it's a great experience we find. But then again, I've got to thank my colleagues that have also opened their labs up because it's something to take in an undergrad, but even something else to take in a high school student. And so I'm appreciative. I take in students in my own lab, so I know what we deal with and the concerns that our graduate students may have. And so again, to all of those that have done it, thank you. And those that haven't done it, why not? Okay, for next year. And again, I find it always important, right? This is our very, very first class, to reach back and pull someone else up. Because I did not get here by myself. Others have pulled me up and offered me new opportunities. But I think it's important to celebrate them being themselves. And I think this is what's important about what we do here at Georgia Tech and what's going to change the face of science. If people feel like I can be myself and be a scientist, then I don't mind going into it. If I've got to change and be this other thing, I can't really sustain that for too long, right? But that means you also should bring your whole self to work as well. I do, because I can't be anything else. And so we have a good time in my group. This is us doing our karaoke battle. And we try to do all the different activities from all the different people in the lab, right? Not only does it create an inclusive environment, but we all learn something different that I found to be quite beneficial. And I said, bring yourself no matter where you go. And to see this picture, this is us in the Great Wall of China. I'm repping Morehouse, of course. And then provide others with a new perspective. And so we kept taking pictures because people kept thinking we were basketball players. I think Ed let them think that, no, but we would correct them and tell them that we were scientists and engineers, right? To change their perspective. Black Americans can do other things besides play ball. And so I like this quote, that diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and then transformation is being allowed to dance to your own beat, right? And that's also when the greatest ideas come about. And tenure! Woo! Rodney gave me my letter at the Delta Sky Club Lounge, and then we took a picture, and it was just, of course, I was loud in there. So by following your dreams and your path and doing the things you're meant to do, guess what? Good things come about. So I like this quote by Maya Angelou also, success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And I think that last part is really important, right? And in all of that, I was happy to be awarded this Emerging Scholars for Diverse Issues in Higher Education, and they put me on the cover, which was kind of cool. But I love the title they put with it, Professors of Purpose. Because I hadn't really thought about myself like that. I'm just living my life doing things that I think should be done. And I love this title, because now I take that on. It's a great thing to think about is how I guide some of the work that we do. Now that was all the happy fun stuff. Yay! But the world changed, or it's always been changing, and it continues to change. And I remember the speech that I gave at the Engages finale of Obama's last year. And the kids were talking all crazy, and I don't know what they were thinking. I was like, are they watching the news? Do they see what's happening and what the talk is on this election? And they're like, no, we're not watching this. So great. But let's talk about what's going on right now. So this is May 9th, New York Times. A black Yale student was napping and a white student called the police. Look at this, a black girl student at Yale who fell asleep in her dorm's common room said she had a disturbing awakening this week when a white student flipped on the lights, told her she had no right to sleep there, and called the campus police. Now, one trick that I use to figure out if I'm thinking something crazy is I like to switch it out, right? So if I were to switch out black for white or man for woman, well, I think that I'm saying something wrong, right? Do I need to change my perspective? So I learned that from my NSF program manager, an old one, Ted Conway, who's paralyzed, and he told us for our REU program, he's like, you need to get more students with disabilities. And I was like, Ted, what if the labs can't take a student with a disability? What if they can't do the work that's going on in the lab? What if they make everybody else in the lab uncomfortable? What if, oh, that's what people say about women and black people. Okay, all right, we're gonna get to students with disabilities. Okay, because if I were to change that, that's what it would be. So I use that now. So let's look at this one. A white graduate student at Yale who fell asleep in her dorm's common room said she had a disturbing awakening when a black student flipped on the lights, told her she had no right to be there, and called the campus police. What? Now that one just sounds bad, period, anyway. Native American brothers pulled, this is May 5th, that was May 9th, this is May 5th. Native American brothers pulled from a campus tour after nervous parents called the police. These two young Native American brothers, they traveled 7 hours to visit Colorado State University from New Mexico. One of the parents who was on the tour became suspicious, called 911, and they came and pulled the Native American students off the tour, right? The brothers who belonged to the Mohawk tribe, they were excited to check out the school because of its proximity to Denver, the capital, right? They didn't get to go back and finish the tour, right? Because someone called the cops on them. And you can change the words if you need to make it sound even worse. May 8th, faculty member shoves black graduates off stage and the University of Florida apologizes. What was happening? The faculty member approaching individual black, well let me change it for you, was approaching individual white students as they danced joyfully in front of a crowd of thousands, and then physically moving them off stage. It showed some black students being hurried along, but in a less forceful manner. What? And here's what you hear the kids say. It was really an ugly scene. One of the hardest parts is that it happened in front of everyone, like our families. This is graduation, and right in front of the administration, right? May 8th. Oh, I took the date off of this one. This one I think is also end of April, early May. He paid for his Mentos, then an officer pulled a gun on him. Jose Areola, I'll imagine he's Latino, walked into a Southern California gas station to buy Mentos on a Friday night, can't shake off what happened next. After he paid for them, placed them in his jacket pocket, an off-duty police officer pulled out a handgun, pointed at his feet, and accused him of stealing them. You can't help, and this is what Mr. Areola said, you can't help but look at all these Facebook videos of cops doing bad things who went public with his story. The way he cocked his gun, I thought he was going to shoot me if I did any wrong move, right? This is also like at the end of April. Change the story and say, a white man, blah, 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 right? These are terrible things happening. This is not recent. This is actually from 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago. Does anybody remember this? When the Black Women Reading Book group got thrown off of the wine train for being too loud in Napa Valley? You know what they said? The group of 11 women, 10 of them black and 1 white, filed a lawsuit 2 months after the episode when the group was escorted off the train for laughing and talking too loudly. It's a wine train to Napa Valley. A wine train. They are a book group. They were being too loud and escorted off. Here's what they said. After they were ordered from the train, they had to walk through all of the cars. We obliged, but that was the most humiliating and embarrassing thing I've ever experienced in my life. Okay? Now they got a nice settlement. They sued for $11 million. They got a nice settlement. Undisclosed amount though. And again, this is recent, May 8th. This is all happening right now. A woman said she saw burglars. They were just black Airbnb guests. Heard about this one? Entirely routine moment. 4 black women were exiting the home of a rented Airbnb and loaded suitcases in their car. Within minutes, several police cars, not one, several police cars had arrived, and the group was being questioned as a helicopter flew overhead. They're checking out of an Airbnb, right? A neighbor who didn't recognize them reported a possible burglary. What happened is the neighbor waved, they didn't wave back. She said they should have waved, and I called the police, she didn't trust them. And what's great about this is that one of these young women is Bob Marley's granddaughter with deep pockets and lawyers on hand, and they will be suing, right? They just live in vacation, okay? And then here's another one, April 25th, so what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? 5 black women were told to golf faster. Then the club called the police, right? And they golfed, and it's funny, they didn't know who these women were. Many of them are professionals. One is a diversity and inclusion officer for a major corporation. They have these other wonderful, fantastic jobs. Called the police on them while they're on the golf course, golfing. You're supposed to golf, right? Like that. These are all in the New York Times. This is also May 8th, last week. Nordstrom Rack apologized to black teenagers falsely accused of stealing. They bought something, they leave the store, there's several cops outside waiting for them, and they have to show their receipts and all of these other things. And of course, most people have heard about this one, right? The Starbucks incident where 2 black men were sitting in the Starbucks for, I forget, it was less than 20 minutes, and they called the cops on them, the cops come in. Now this is an interesting story too. These 2 young black men, they were 23, they were waiting on a white man that they were having a business relationship with. And the white man comes in and says, what did they get called for? Asked the man, Andrew Yaffe, who was white, the friend of the police. Let me flip this one, because this one's better to flip. What did they get called for? Asked the man, Andrew Yaffe, who was black, referring to the police. Because there are 2 white guys sitting here meeting me? Moments later, officers escort one of the white men out of the Starbucks in handcuffs. The other soon followed. What's going on, right? All of these incidents, except the train, happened in the last month in America. To be black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage, right? I bring this up to you because I am black. You can see that, right? Out of all of these things that happen, they could happen to me. Things similar to this have happened to me. They happen to my brothers, they happen to my family members, or they can even happen to people that I know and people in my lab. So yeah, we may be in constant rage, but we are happy people, right? We don't want conflict, we don't want to fight. And so here's some helpful tips. For when a person of color makes you nervous, and I want to share that with the Georgia Tech community because this is not who we should be, right? But things do happen here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if you're nervous, think of why you are there and consider that they are there for the exact same reason. Those black women who are playing golf, they're probably on a golf course to play golf. You're at a Starbucks to meet someone to talk about business, they're probably there to meet someone to talk about business, right? Assume that. Say hello, as Bob Deere says, put the least dramatic interpretation on it, okay? Say hello. Start a conversation. Chances are they are more afraid of you than you are of them because we know who the police gives power to, right? Realize that you have a right to your feelings, this is true, but not a right to exclude others from public places. If you're still uncomfortable, you can leave and be safe in your car or at your house. But do not assume they are a threat because they're different from you. We are all different from each other. Call police and imply that they are dangerous because you are putting their life at risk when you do. We all know about different interactions that the police have had with innocent individuals. Decide that you have more of a right to a public space than they do. It's America, right? But I just want to say that we can look at the national cases and be like, oh, that happens in other spaces and maybe that's not real and I don't know anyone. But it happens right here at Georgia Tech, okay? So, black professor pulled over and harassed by Georgia Tech PD, called in an additional cop to interrogate for a little tiny light that was off next to my license plate. This happened to me, right? This is like 11 o'clock at night leaving campus. That was fun. So they kept me there for like 30 minutes. I don't know what was going on, but when the other car came around, really? And I'm a tenured professor here? So when I leave work, I need to be nervous? No. Professional black woman with 25 years experience working with Georgia Tech with high praise and evaluations was denied a promotion because she, quote, comes off abrasive and, quote, lacks poise as determined by an all-white male faculty panel. Wow, right? And then 2 black female grad students that I know, Kia Parks in my lab and Simone Douglas, were verbally assaulted with the N-word while walking across campus less than 3 weeks ago, right? And so now I have to try to help them deal with that and then also have concerns for my students and Scout Schultz, right? These things happen very close to all of us. That's why all of us need to be involved and all of us need to be vigilant. My sister-in-law sent this to me this morning. The feeling at the end of a grueling day when every black faculty member has been working overtime to support black students dealing with racism, and then you run into some white colleagues after work and they seem unbothered and you realize, ooh, they spent their whole day writing. Imagine to have the brain space to just focus on that, right? So when we look at this 50% and all these other things that people are dealing with, it's a regular thing for me, right? Doesn't mean that I expect anything different to be treated, but these are things that I deal with, and they slow down my work process at times unless I can shove them to the back. And these are lessons that I try to give to engaged students. I'm like, hey, you gotta put it to the side. And that's where the power of privilege really comes into play, right? It's a privilege to just be able to write all day long, right? But privilege comes in many forms besides just gender and race, right? And that's what we all have to remember. And I think about Naomi Kessler's diversity lecture from BMES in 2014, where she talked about the different axes of privilege. And I'll take you back to my good friend Hannah, who was sitting next to me and was punching me during the talk like, you have this privilege, look at this privilege. So of course, gender, race, and heterosexual privilege. Then when Naomi said height privilege, Hannah was like, you have height privilege. And I make a lot of jokes about the short people in my lab. I am aware, okay? Citizenship privilege, it's huge, particularly these days. Language, Hannah was punching me again. You are a native English speaker, and it's a privilege. I was like, I get it, relax, okay? Physical ability, education, class, socioeconomic, Christian privilege, right? That is the, quote, norm in the US, even though there's a rich church state. Health status privilege, right? If you're healthy, normally, generally, it's great for you. And geographical location privilege. Those of us that live here, were born here, maybe we have it better than people that live in more war-torn areas. But again, it's important to remember intersectionality. You may have more than one of these privileges at the same time, right? And you should think about it, other people may have more or less of those disadvantages at the same time. But I want to talk about what privilege means because it comes up and people get like hot-headed about it. So let's just break it down in a fair way. So privilege simply means that under the exact same set of circumstances you're in, life would be harder without the privilege, okay? So for example, being poor is hard. Everyone agrees with that, yes? Being poor and disabled is harder, right? Can't argue with that, right? Being a woman is hard. Being a trans woman is harder, right? With the way that people treat you. Being a white woman is hard. Being a woman of color is harder. The stats bear that out. Being a black man is hard. Being a gay black man is harder, right? So there's a privilege even when things are hard. So a privilege is not saying, it's not saying that you have it easy, okay? So privilege is the other side of oppression. But most people notice the oppression because it's easy to notice when we're treated unfairly, but not things that are just the norm, right? But here's the thing, privilege and oppression affect each other, but they don't negate each other. You can be rich and white and a woman, but maybe it's still going to be harder if you become CEO. And you've had all the best training, right? So it's not that you don't have these other privileges, but there still is this oppression, right? Oh, this is the key thing. Often people believe they can't have privilege because they experience oppression, right? But they don't negate each other. Privilege describes what everyone should experience. Everyone should be treated in such a way, right? We call privilege privilege because we acknowledge that not everyone experiences it. And then again, this is the most important critical point, and this is where people start to think that what people are trying to say. It's not what anyone's saying. Privilege doesn't mean you didn't work hard, right? You can be privileged and still have a difficult life. It doesn't mean your life is easy, but rather that it's easier than it could have been without that privilege, okay? And I want to then take it back to the importance of allyship, right? Because there are people with privilege, use your privilege for good. And that's where allies become important. That's why, again, Dr. Joe said, Manu, go work with Hannah. And so I did, because he said he knew what it was to come to America and not be English native speaker, right? And so then that blossomed into a fruitful relationship. So use your privilege for good. But who's been an excellent example of being good allies are the Parkland High School students, survivors. Excellent examples, because everyone is paying attention to them and everyone has been giving a lot of, or used to now, things start to die down really quickly in this country. But they began to recognize, hey, listen, we are a rich white high school. This is why people are listening to us. And they began to make space for the other groups. They're like, what about what's going on in other places and other communities where there have been shootings that are not being paid attention to? Because what is what the country says? Anytime they talk about shooting and making gun laws, what city do they say? It's terrible. Chicago. Everybody knows. They're like, but Chicago. They began to make room and say, let's bring the Chicago students here to talk about it. And so let's talk about Chicago. So they say nobody's trying to fix Chicago, or the gun violence happened in Chicago, and nobody's trying to do anything. Well, there were protests in Chicago in May 2017, and these are young kids. Stop the hate. Their protest was, they did a protest, and then they went out to play in the playground, because they didn't play in the playground for 3 months because of the gun violence, right? So their protest act was to actually go out and play in the playground, and they had people watch it. This is May 2017. This is December 2016 in Chicago. Huge march for all the people that had lost a loved one to gun violence that year. Maybe it got pressed, maybe it didn't. This is 2015. Look at these young kids. Don't shoot, I want to grow up. So Chicago. Put the guns down, let your kids grow up. People say Chicago's not trying to fight to change gun violence. 2014, another protest, massive protest in Chicago about violence to guns. 2013, this one breaks my heart, gives little boo-boos. Protect children, not guns. So people say Chicago has not been trying to make attention. They have been. But that's why I love what the Parkland students were doing, because they've now brought them into the conversation, brought the news reporters to them and said, now let them speak, right? So an ally makes a space and then gets out the way and lets people use that space. So, we're talking about privilege and lack of privilege. Again, I love this quote too. While my lived experience may be up for discussion, it is never up for debate. I will not tell you my life is easier than yours or your life is harder than mine, because I don't know your situation and I don't know all of your intersections. But please don't tell me that same thing, right? Don't say, oh, you got it easy because this is that. Wait, you actually only know what you know about me, right? And so we cannot make these assumptions. Let's just treat everyone as human beings. And in the spirit of allyship and being inclusive, again, I have to remind people, Puerto Rican lives matter, right? We are now still 233 days since Hurricane Maria, right? And so I'm living in America worrying about these black issues that I saw that was happening the last 2 weeks and worried about how that's impacting my family and if it's gonna happen to me. There are people from Puerto Rico whose families are still struggling over there. And they're supposed to be here doing their classwork, taking finals that just happened, right? Being in the research lab, and they're supposed to kind of segment their thoughts so they can do what they're here to do while having this gnawing away at the background, right? Their lives do matter. Honduran lives matter, right? We just hear about these immigrants that have just come to San Diego and Tijuana, and they're gonna like send them back to the gang warfare. Their lives matter. Iranian lives matter. As the rhetoric heats up, and the US is talking these things, we have Iranian graduate students here, right? Their lives matter. Jewish lives matter. If it's the war that breaks out, their lives, these are people that we're talking about. Black lives matter. The other lives matter should not be a complicated thing to say that black lives matter, right? Palestinian lives matter, right? Those are human beings also in a part of the world. Trans lives matter. People that are trans, as we know, they get harassed and attacked. And then there's intersectionality. Palestinian trans lives matter, right? Because we aren't just one category. Syrian lives matter, right? No matter how people are shaped in the media, they're people, right? We can't put this on people. Gay lives matter, right? There's still attacks and homophobia, and it's now you can hear the rhetoric that's happening in the country, and black gay lives matter also, right? You always have to think about intersections. And so, we are engineers. I took a class called set theory when I was an undergraduate. Some of you maybe call it discrete math, but you can do the theory, right? To say all lives matter is true. For all lives matter to be true, each of those individual lives must matter or the proof doesn't work. So there's no need to have a retort and say all lives matter. No, that means you agree with me that black lives matter. Thank you. And then you just walk off, okay? And we should think about that for everyone else. And so I just want to say, I'm a member of BME Society, and I love our community, and I love what we're doing here at Georgia Tech, but also the national community, because BME Bioengineering, we are the engineering discipline that has 50% women, right? And though we have equal numbers, there's still differences, right? And so there's still much to be done, and that's where all of us need to be involved, and those of us with male privilege need to be considerate of what our women colleagues are going through or thinking about when they tell us this is happening and this needs to be rectified. And again, what I was really excited about last year at the meeting was the number of women chairs in biomedical engineering that's been popping up all over the country. And of course, we have our wonderful new one here, Susan Margulies, who's been a great person since she's been here. And so next year, the 50th anniversary for BMES will be in Atlanta. We expect all of you to be involved. We'll be doing a lot with high school students and a whole lot of other outreach activities. Plus, we need to show everyone that a diverse, inclusive graduate program, research team, research labs, that's the best, right? And I want to share what's already been happening. So, in the spirit of all of that, this is the incoming class for the BME BioE students coming in BME homeschool. We had 40 students say yes, 15 are Asian, that covers like Korea, China, Vietnam, all those places, India. 11 white or Caucasian, 3 Latina, 1 Pacific Islander, and 8 black students. That is 20% of the class. What? National average is 13%. Okay? This is crazy. We're very excited. But we all did this together, right? And so when I showed those numbers and how we've been trying to grow things over time, we all did this together. We're changing what BME Bioengineering looks like to the rest of the country and the nation. And now we all need to be on board to graduate them all together, okay? And that involves all of us in this room. They will help you graduate and you can help them. And that's me calling on my faculty colleagues to make sure we pick up these students and mentor them appropriately. And also for those that are in the lab to be an inclusive space for them all to come in, all right? And we got CMAT to help. Because I want to point out again, I started talking about G-Tech. G-Tech created such an environment here on campus of just open, inclusive science and about outreach and about sharing and with seed grants, and it just bolstered so many careers and so many ideas. And now CMAT is just getting started. So for you grad students here, get ready, because it can be a hell of a ride to have an ERC on campus. And I just want to end here with the Everybody's Bill of Rights. Actually, I'll just go through it. But we do have the right to be treated with respect, blah, 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 and you can read these on your own. But I love number 7. We all have the right to make mistakes, right? I don't represent everybody who may look like me, And if I make a mistake, doesn't mean that everybody who looks like me will make those mistakes, right? I represent me. But you make mistakes, and you have a right, if I make a mistake, as long as we learn from those mistakes and move forward in the future. Okay? Gotta thank my lab group because they're awesome. Sorry, I should have taken off the funding people. And that's part of the group there. And thank you all for inviting me. Thank you all for listening. And I'm ready to eat.
Before we head over to eat, I think we're all hungry. Well, I'm hungry. We have a couple of awards from the festivities today. So first, I want to thank the judges, the Blue Ribbon panel for